This workflow is going to look at how you can import in your own site data. So this model here is set in Sydney, Australia, and this is going to be a workflow to import data from sources like SketchUp Warehouse. So here you can go to the 3D Warehouse and you can download files that have been made by users. So there's a lot of good files here, and you can download them as the SketchUp files and then convert them to OBJ. If you're a SketchUp user, you can export them out in various file formats. I'm a 3ds Max user, so I will bring it into 3ds Max and I will clean up the model before bringing it into Forma. Here is the import for SketchUp. Here is the model. I have converted it to an editable polygon. The editable poly, you can just do it here within the modifier stack there. I can then attach the model into one singular object. Here I'm looking at a perspective mode. I can see the polygon count. If I put it on user mode, I can see it's a clean model. I can start to edit this model if the polygon count is high. So we want to keep things light inside of Forma. If you want to reduce it, in the modifier list here, you can go to faces and vertexes of the model, and you can start to delete them. And you see as you're selecting different parts of the model, so maybe it's been over-modeled in some places, you can select those components and delete them, and it will start to reduce up here the polygon count. So just a little tip there to optimize the models before you start bringing them into Forma for your site context. Here I'm going to export it out as an OBJ file. So I'm using the export selected because it's a singular model now. This is one that I've done before to test this workflow. Here inside of Forma, I'm just going to show you the workflow to bring this in. So you have your order data and your import. All I've done for this site is I've just used the flat terrain. The OSM data is not that accurate. So I'm starting with just a flat site with this map as a guide. That's my flat terrain. And then I can import here the different file formats. So OBJ, IFC, there's vectors for DXF files and raster images. Now, depending on what data source you got it from, you may need to adjust the units. So this one is in meters, but I think the original source might have been in centimeters. So you can see here when I'm measuring parts in 3ds Max, it's 4 meters. But when I want to bring it in here into Forma, I will move it to centimeters, and then we'll see it scale on the Forma grid. So the Forma grid here is 10 meters by 10 meters, so that looks correct, looks to scale. I just had to make that change to the import configuration. You can also rotate it if the y-axis is up the wrong way, if it's come from another data source. There is a georeferencing system here where you can choose the map grid of Australia, but this is still very much beta mode, so it's probably not going to work perfectly, but it is something that is in there in Forma at the moment. I'm going to interactively place this, so I'm just going to do the ellipses there on the model, place in canvas, and when it comes into scale. So I've got that flat terrain image that I've used, and here there's a couple of little notes about importing. Just ignore that. And here when I go to my 2D, you can see it's lining up pretty sharply inside of Forma. So that SketchUp model as an OBJ file has come through, and it's forming a solid inside of my site context. Some other things you can do here with this data that you import. In the background here, I'm working on another design. This site boundary, site limit, you can move that to where the Opera House is. So if I just move those points, and now I have my site limit here in 3D to analyze the models that are within that site limit. So it's a generic model. I can bring it in, and this is winter in Australia. We're in the southern hemisphere. I can run the analysis for sunlight, for daylight, for wind, microclimate. And here you'll see how much hours of sunlight you're going to get. So New South Wales, you might be working within the SEP 65 calculations. This potentially could be used as a guide to get you started. Here on the Opera House, we can see all the sun at this time of year, and we can go to inspect it. So if we select under the hood, you can see there's no hours of sun, whereas on the glass faces there's a lot of sun.